Hey everyone, I hope everything is going well with you. So I'm going to cover today the most useful widgets on Tkinter, and we are going to learn how we can receive an input from another user with a text box, and also how we can use checkboxes and radio buttons. And I'm going to give clear examples for each of the widgets, so after this video you will be able to create graphical user interfaces at a much higher level. So let's begin. Alright, so I'm going to call here the entry widget, and I'm going to make a program that is going to accept the text within that entry, and we are going to grab the inputted text by the user by clicking a button later on. So now, as you already know, if we are going ahead and run that out, there's nothing special going on here. We are just having a basic window with a customized size. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a new entry. So it will be entry 1 equals to entry. And then as regular, we are going to specify where we want to locate this entry. And then we will go here and we will also specify the font size. So I will have the control to make our entries bigger. So I will go here and call a new tuple, and I will give here the font size as 24, and I think that will be it for the entry 1 right now. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pack this up. Okay, so let's see the results until now. Okay, so you can see that we have a special box here that we can write some text here, and that is great. Now, if you want to make this entry smaller, then basically it makes sense to change its font. Now, if I run that out, you can see that this entry got smaller. But the problem with what we have done until now is that we don't have any special functionality to grab the text that the user has written inside that entry. And it totally makes sense to grab the text inside that entry whenever we want. So in order to do that, we are going to create some new special variable that we did not see until now, and I'm going to call it entry1 variable, and I'm going to make that to be equal to an instance of string var, and I'm going to close those parentheses here. Now, when I go ahead and do that, basically what I'm saying here is that I'm going to have a special Tkinter variable with a type of string, and I'm going to assign its value to that entry's value that I'm going to put later on. So in order to make this variable to being related to that entry, I'm going to go here and going to create a new attribute that is called text variable. So what that means, it means that we are going to grab the entry1 value and we are going to assign its value to the entry1 variable. Now the text variable arrives from the entry itself, so it is a special attribute that the entry is going to deal with. And by creating this assignment over here, basically what I am doing is telling that entry1 that store the value of this entry1 in this entry1 variable. And I'm going to grab this value later on. And I'm going to go down here and create a button, and I will call it button 1. And this time I will also want to put that inside the root. And I'm going to write a text like grab information. So when we go ahead and click on this button, basically I will grab the entry value. So I will go here and pack this button, and this time I will apply side equals bottom, and I will also write here fill equals x, so my button will be expanded. And now if I go ahead and run that out, you can see the button down below, but whenever I press here, nothing really happens. So let me show you how you can grab the entry1 variable. So we will go down here and we will write some functionality for that. So we will go and create a function which is called grabInfo in order to assign it later on as a command to that button. And I will go ahead and write here entry1.get. So this get method is going to go inside that text variable and it is going to search for that entry value and return that back. So it makes sense to go and wrap this up with a print statement, and then I will be able to see that entry 1 value, and I'm going to go out inside the grab info function and I'm going to assign this functionality to that button 1. So if you watched my previous videos, you should be familiar with this, and I'm going to write here button1.configure, and I'm going to write here attribute command, and I'm going to make that to be equal to grab info, and make sure that you don't write those parentheses here, so you want to refer to that function. And then I will run this program. Great, so when I run this out and write here a string like Python, you can see that we receive the string down below because I have printed that inside my grab info function. But I want to show you some weird behavior that will also make this program to work. So I'm going to change this .get here and I'm going to call that underscore variable which arrives from here, and it is assigned as the text variable of our entry 1, and I'm going to apply the same .get method over the entry 1 underscore variable, and I'm going to rerun my program and test that out. So I will write here Python again, and then I will write grab information, and then you can see that it still works. Okay, so which one of the methods we should use? Okay, so shall we call the entry 1.get, or maybe we should call the entry 1 underscore variable .get? So the answer for this question would be to stick with entry 1 underscore variable, and the reason for that is quite simple. Now if you want to change this from being a string to an integer, what you can do here is changing this string here to a shortened version of int, and that will be int. And so if I leave this program as it is and execute that out, you can see that by default the Tkinter provides me some integer which is basically 0. Now if I press here grab information, you can see that everything is quite great, but we really want to test out if the type of that value is actually an integer. So I'm going to close my program, and before we print the value of that, we can grab the same statement and go with something like print again, and then we will print the type of whatever the entry1.variable's value is. So I will close my terminal again and I will execute our program. And now I'm going to press grab information again, and now you can see that our class is actually an integer. So what that means? It means that it tries to convert the text over here to an integer before it returns you the value. So that is a perfect behavior. Now if I go ahead and press here Python and then go with grab information again, you can see that we receive an error that says that the expected number was a floating number, but it got Python. Now we can also change that to double var. So what that means? It means that it is going to expect for a float, and you can see that by seeing the default value as 0.0. So this is a quite great behavior that you want to apply, and then you can force your users to receive a special type of variable rather than just strings. Okay, so you always want to think how you can grab the variable's value and not the widget itself. So it makes totally sense, because that way it will allow you to receive the type of variable that you want. Alright, so I'm going to jump on to our next topic, and that will be to talk about radio buttons. Now if you did not see radio buttons before, basically it is the option to choose one value among a list of values. So a good example for what we are going to build in the next minutes would be something like this. So I'm going to bring in here what we are going to build, and then you can see that we have 3 buttons, and those buttons are called radio buttons because they are actually choosable by clicking on them. And then once I clicked here, you can see that this option has been marked, and you can see the black dot over there. Now if I press other or mail, you can see that I have the ability to choose only one value among those 3 values. So it is quite important to understand in radio buttons, because when you hear the term of radio buttons, basically what that means, it means that you have only the option to select one and only among a list of options. So we are going to write a window where you can only choose one value among those 3 values, which are male, female, and other. So let's see how we are going to do that. Okay, so I'm going to delete the entire code here, and I'm going to stay only with root equals tk, and then the geometry, and then the root.main loop. And then we are going to create some radio buttons in order to show you how they work. So let's actually try to create our first radio button. So I will create a new variable, and we will make that to equal to r1, and then I will call the class of radio button, and I want to locate it inside our root, and then we will write here text equals male, like the example that we saw, and then we will go here with font to make that a little bigger, and then we will make that to be equal to an empty string because I don't want to change the font type, and then we will write here 24 to make that bigger. Now I'm going to pack this up, but I'm going to apply here an attribute to make things look a little bit more clean, and I'm going to go with anchor equals to w. So anchor, it is basically a one more layout method, and it is quite like side. So we saw the side equals top before. Basically what anchor is going to do, it is going to align your widget as much as possible to the direction that you are going to specify. Now the values that you are going to write here are going to be the same values that are possible with a compass. Okay, so you have west, and then you have east as E, and then you have north as N, and then you have S, that stands for the south. And I'm going to push this radio button to as much as left position as possible, and this is why I'm going to write here west. And once I execute that out, you can see that we have a checkbox, I mean a radio button, that is aligned in the left position, so it is right there. And I'm going to create 2 more of those, so it will be just an easy copy paste here. So I will go here with 2 copy and pastes, and I will allow myself to minimize the terminal, and then I will change those values. Okay, so let's call it R2 that time, like that, and then this will be changed to R3, and then I'm going to override my values here, I mean the text, so that will be female, and this one will be other. Now once I execute this, you can see that we have 3 radio buttons, but there are quite problems with this kind of form because we see that all the radio buttons are checked by default. So it might be nicer to have only the first value as the marked option, and we are going to apply this functionality just in a second. So I will close my window out, and I will go back to the PyCharm, and let's actually write the functionality of marking one value by default. So I'm going to create here a string var like we did in the previous example. So that will be again radio underscore var, and I'm going to make that to be equal to a string var again, and then I'm going to go down here and make some several changes in each of my radio buttons. Now I'm going to assign here as my variable that will be equal to radio var. Now previously we used the attribute of text variable, and we have done that because the entry widget is going to act like text by default. But when it comes to radio buttons, we can basically assign an attribute that is called variable, and I'm going to make that to be equal to radio var, and I'm going to apply the same functionality for all my radio buttons. So I will copy the variable equals radio var, and I will paste that in all the radio buttons. So this is what I have done now. And now what I'm going to do here is applying the functionality of being aware of which of the radio buttons are clicked each time. So I will go here and I will create a new function, and then I'm going to go inside my radio button and assign it as my command. So it is just as equal to being aware of the value like we did with buttons before. So I will go here and I will create a function that is called grab selection. So I want to know which of the selections are clicked, and then I'm going to write here something like the following. So I will go with print, and then I will write here radio var dot get. So once I do that, I will be able to receive the value of that radio underscore var, and then I'm going to hit comma in each of my radio buttons, and I will go with command equals to grab selection. So make sure to direct to that function and not call it. And I'm going to copy this statement again, and then I'm going to paste that in inside each of my radio buttons. So that will be comma here once again, and then Control V for paste. Now I might think that I'm ready to execute this program, so let's actually go ahead and test this. So I'm going to minimize my font a little bit to make that aligned in the entire page, and then I'm going to execute my program. You can see that this still doesn't quite work because we don't see anything. Now the reason that this happens, it is basically because in radio buttons you have to specify the value that you want to pass in that each of the radio underscore var. Now since there are 3 assignments for that variable, we are going to configure a value for each one of them. And the value that we are going to assign for each of our radio buttons, it is going to be just as equal to the text value. So we will go here with value equals to male, and I'm going to do the same functionality for each of our radio buttons, and I will go here again with value equals to female, and I will close that out with a comma here, and now I will do that one more time for my third radio button, and I'm going to change that to other. Now if I go ahead and run that time and grab this window to here, now I'm going to press to male, you can see that we receive male, and then you can see that the selection is only being changed to that male. Now I will click female here, and now you can also see that it changed great, and for other it is going to work as well. Now the only problem we have left with, it is basically the fact that we see by default all the radio buttons are checked. So we are going to change this, okay, and we are going to tell to that radio var which one of the radio buttons values we want to activate when we execute our program in the first execution. So that will be radio underscore var dot set, and then we want to pass in the value string that we want to activate at the very first execution. So I will go here with male just to specify that this has to be the default value, and I will run our program, and then you can see that this is a quite expected behavior, because once you run some window, there is probably going to be one option that is going to be checked by default, and that is totally making sense. Now I can move on and activate different buttons as expected, and that is perfect. Now if I want to change my default value, basically I can go here and write other, for example, and you can see that the other has been marked as default, and I can do the same with female, and then this will work quite great as well. But make sure to use that dot set button, I mean the dot set method, just in order to specify what default value you want to start your program. Okay, so you can see that I have cleaned the entire screen here, and I only left with root.geometry, and that's it. So we are going to talk now about checkboxes, and basically they are quite same to radio buttons, but the main difference between those two will be the ability to select more than one option. So with radio buttons we saw that we only can choose one among a list of options, but when it comes to checkboxes we have the option to select more than one. Okay, so this is the main difference between radio button to check button. Okay, so this is the way it is defined in Tkinter, and it is called check buttons. And you can also call them checkboxes, and it is actually up to you, whatever you like. Okay, so we will go here and start creating a few of checkboxes. So in order to do that time I'm going to do that with a for loop, because I want to show you the multiple options of how you can create same widget multiple times. So in order to do that, I will go ahead and create a new list, and I will call it options, and then we will fill in some values. So we will go with videos, and we will write in music, and also documents, and we will go with pictures, and let's write here also spreadsheets. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to iterate over this list, and I'm going to create check button. So we will go here with for option in options, and then I will write inside my for loop check underscore btn. So just a short version for button, to not being confused with the check button itself. And then I'm going to call that check button class, and then I'm going to specify that I want it inside my root, and as the text I will provide the option that I'm iterating on. And I'm going to apply the same aligning method like the previous one. So we will go with pack, and then I will write here anchor equals to west. So I expect to see all those check buttons aligned to left, and I'm going to execute this program. So let's run that out, and you can see that those options are right there. Now I want to make the text bigger, just because I want you to see that more clear. So I will go with font equals to a new tuple, and then I will write an empty string, and then our size will be 24. Now if I run again, you can see that, excuse me, you can see that we have videos, music, documents, pictures, and spreadsheets. So this is quite the expected behavior. Now I'm going to show here how we can be aware of what is being clicked or not. Because if we run our program again, you can see that we don't have any special information about which one of those check buttons are being actually activated in a certain amount of time. So I'm going to write here such a program that after I press some of the check buttons, I'm going to click a certain button here, and then it will show me a nice output which of the check buttons are being activated and which are not activated. So let's actually write this. Okay, I'm going to close my program, and then I'm going to create a var for each of the check buttons. So it is just going to follow the logic that we already saw for radio buttons and also for entries, and we are going to apply the same logic for check buttons, but we are going to assign a variable, I mean a Tkinter variable for each of the check buttons, and you will see why I do this just in a second. So I'm going to go here with check underscore button underscore var, okay, and then I will make that to be equal to an integer variable, and then I'm going to go here, and then let's write a comma, and then I will start a new line here just to make things more organized, and then I will write here variable equals to check underscore button underscore var. Now that doesn't mean that we already can know which of the check buttons are being clicked or not. Now before I go ahead, I want to show you something about check button, and I want to inspect this class here. Okay, so I'm going to grab the check button, and then if you use PyCharm you can press Ctrl B, and that will allow you to see what is going inside that class. Now if you use Visual Code, that will be F12, and if you use Sublime, I'm not sure about the combination, but you can check that out in Google. So I will press Ctrl B, and that will lead me to the defined check button class inside the Tkinter library, and I'm going to zoom things up here, and then you can see that we have the valid resource names, and that list of strings here are about the special options that you can provide for your check buttons. Now I'm going to focus my mouse on those two strings here, and what that means, it means that you can specify an off value and an on value for each of your check buttons. And that is totally making sense because you always want to be aware when your check buttons are not activated and are activated. And that is why I'm going to go back here to my main file, and I'm going to go here with something like the following. So we will write here on value. So I'm going to provide the value that it will be assigned to that check button var when the check button is clicked. So I will make that 1, and to off value I'm going to write 0. So that is quite simple because the on value, it makes sense to be 1, and the off value, it is totally making sense to be 0. And that is the exact reason why I defined this check button var as integer, so it will know to deal with 1 and 0. And now I'm going to go ahead and write here a new button. So I'm outside of my for loop, and then I will create a button, and then I will call it button underscore info. So that will be an informative button that will display which check buttons are clicked or not. And then I will go here with button, and then we want that inside our root, and then the text for that will be grab info, and then we will make the font for that bigger again just because we want to see what is going on inside that button. And then we will go here and pack this up, and then we will do side equals bottom, and then we will also write here fill equals x, and then I will execute that program, and you can see that we have one more button here. Now we are going to specify the functionality for this button just like we did previously in entries and also in radio buttons. So I'm going to go here and let's actually write a nice comment here that will say that from here I will program the functionalities. And then I'm going to make our font bigger here. And then right here, I want to define a function that will grab all the check button instances. And then I'm going to define here some function that will iterate over all of our check buttons, and it will check if they are clicked or not clicked. So we are going to go here with def grab check buttons status, and then we will close our function with parentheses, and inside here we kind of searching for a special method that will give us all the check buttons that are created. Now, once we got here inside that function, we currently don't know about each of the states of those check buttons. So in order to be aware of those check buttons, we need to store them kind of in a separated dictionary, and then we can iterate over that dictionary when we go ahead and execute this function when we press on button underscore info. So it makes sense to store the check button underscore var and then the check underscore button in a separated dictionary that we can iterate on later. So I'm going to go on top here and I'm going to grab the check button underscore var and then the check button right after the iteration. So this is why I'm going to create here a list which is going to be called check buttons. Then I will make that to be equal to an empty list. And then right after each of the execution of for loop finishes, I will append the check button var and then the check button to that list. But since we want both of them to be related to each other, we will add them as tuples. So we are going to go here and we are going to append two check buttons. So that will be dot append, and then we want to add here a tuple, and both of the tuples values are going to be check button and check button underscore var. So it will be check button and then the check button var. So the check button var defines the status of each of our check buttons, and once I do that, I can go down to that function again and I can go here and start iterating over my check buttons. So before we actually get into deeper functionality, let's actually try to print what is inside the check buttons. So it might make sense because I want to show you what is inside that check buttons right after we appended each of the values here. So I will run that program again. And then we will see the results once I click grab info. So excuse me, I forgot to assign the functionality. For sure that won't work. And then I will go here, and outside of my function we can go with button underscore info dot configure, and then we will assign command equals to grab check button status, and then I will delete the parentheses to not call this function. And now I can run my program, and let's actually see the results. So I will press grab info, and then you can see that we have a long list, and then each of our lists includes a tuple, and all the tuples are filled with check button object and the int var object that is assigned to that unique check button. So I'm going to continue on here in the iteration in order to grab the status of each of our check buttons. So we will go here and we will write for, and then we want to unpack each of the tuples that we are iterating on. So this is why I'm going to define here two variables. So that will be check underscore button, because this is the first appended object here. And then I'm going to also write again check button var. Okay, so this time those variables are going to be relevant inside my for loop, and I'm going to write here in check buttons. And then inside my for loop I'm going to go inside my check button, and then I'm going to grab its text. So if you remember, we can grab some of the widget's attributes by the cget method, and then I'm going to write here text, and then I'm going to print this up. Okay, so we will try to print it down, and then I also want to print here one more value. So I will go near my print function, and then we will pass here one more value, so it will just print that near it. And then I will write here check button var dot get, and then once I hit the get, basically it will provide its value. Okay, so we are going to execute that program now, and let's see the results. Now if I go ahead and press grab info now, you can see that the videos are defined as 0, and music, documents, pictures and spreadsheets are all 0 as well. So I'm going to go back to my program, and then I'm going to activate videos and then the music. And then if I press grab info again, you can see that our information that has been shown here is quite different, because we activated the videos and then we also activated music. So that could be one way to being aware of the check buttons statuses, of the check buttons status, when you go ahead and assign some function to a certain button. And it is totally making sense to iterate over a list of values and then define some check buttons and then bring them outside to a separated list, so you will have the ability to iterate over them later on. But for sure there are multiple ways to accomplish such a task, but that will be the simplest way in my opinion. So that is why we programmed it that way. Alright everyone, so I hope you liked this video. If you have any questions about what I have done here, make sure to comment them out, and for sure I will respond. So if you like that video, consider subscribing and also hit the like button. I will see you in my next upload.